Welcome to Sausage on a Fork, a podcast dedicated to the UK's longest running children's drama programme, Grange Hill. My name's Neil, and in each episode I'll interview a former cast member about their life before, during and after their time on the programme. Okay, welcome to the latest episode of Sausage on a Fork, and I am absolutely delighted to say that I have been joined for this episode by none other than Carl Saxton-Pizzie, who played Raju. Carl, welcome to Sausage on a Fork.
Hi, Neil. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Not at all. Not at all. What we'll do, Carl, is we'll start this episode the way we start every episode. And if you can tell us how you first got into acting.
Gosh. Well, I first got into acting because when I was 7, my mum asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I was watching Record Breakers with
Right.
Roy Castle.
Yeah.
Right? Remember Roy Castle?
Yeah.
He's a great presenter, but obviously an amazing tap dancer, an amazing trumpet player.
Yeah.
So at the end of every episode of Record Breakers, right? I mean, there's going to be so many people that just haven't got a clue what we're talking about. But he used to tap dance and play the trumpet.
Yeah.
And I was watching that and I said, I'd like a pair of tap shoes and a trumpet.
Right.
And so really kind of within weeks, my mum had contacted Sylvia Young, who had a school in a Saturday school at a boxing club in Covent Garden.
Uh-huh.
And she was just about to move to Marylebone. And so I started to go to tap classes at Marylebone, in Marylebone at Sylvia Young. And then, she kind of said to my mum that she was about to start a full-time school, and I joined like ridiculously at the age of sort of 7 or 8. I guess I was probably 8. I don't really know.
Uh-huh.
And then got into it and like realized very quickly that I was absolutely useless at tap. I didn't really enjoy it very much.
Right.
But I really liked drama, and also it was very, very different from where I was growing up. So I think there were several of us at Sylvia's really that actually just saw it as an incredible way out of where we lived.
Yeah.
I was living in deep, darkest North London, and the idea of going somewhere that, you know, in a way, theatre school sort of was quite classless, you know. Yeah. So it sort of and it went from there, you know. And then I didn't really stop acting until I was I don't know, kind of in my late 20s, really.
Wow.
Which is a long time ago now.
Brilliant. All down to Roy Castle then.
All down to watching a lot of TV.
Yeah.
Like basically, you know, like Blue Peter and and obviously Grange Hill.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So you said that you were there at Sylvia Young's, and were you at Sylvia Young's with anyone else who we might know?
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, you know, obviously it felt like a rite of passage that if you were at Sylvia's, you generally did do a stint in Grange Hill.
Right,
right?
Okay.
So, you know, I remember, you know, obviously John was in the year below me, or maybe 2 years below me. And then, you know, Margot and Jamie, and oh God, Ian, I think there's a boy called Ian. Who was in, but Jamie Lahane, you know, so many people were in Grange Hill. And obviously, you know, some people went on to do a lot of different other things. And I guess some people remained actors, right? I mean, I can't really remember.
Yeah, and so before Grange Hill then, did you get much acting work?
Yeah, before, I mean, that's predominantly how I paid the school fees. Right. I used to do a lot of commercials.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of, I mean, I think I cornered the toothpaste commercial world in Saudi Arabia.
Right, okay.
Because it would be like, oh yeah, he's a bit dark, he'll do. But yeah, so yes, lots and lots of commercials, lots of bits and bobs on TV, you know, lots of random stuff, nothing amazing, like, you know, nothing leading, like, you know, like obviously I guess before Grange Hill, John would have done things like 2.4 Children, wouldn't he, with, I think it was Claire Buckfield.
Claire, yeah. So he left Grange Hill to go to 2.4 Children.
Oh, okay. All right. It was that way around. Okay, yeah.
John,
we were very young. Yeah.
John. I remember John from loads of adverts.
Yeah.
Like he just had that face, a memorable face.
Yeah.
He was in loads of stuff.
I mean, the whole family, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got you down, but like I say this all the time. I use IMDb as my primary source of research, but I know it's not the most reliable. But I've got you down for being in something. It was a Screen 2 film called Dead Lucky, and your credit was Flower Shop Delivery Boy.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, God, I was tiny. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I think IMDb. I think it was. I didn't pick up what a lot of us had done previously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was probably one of my first jobs. But yeah, there was a lot of bits and bobs before Grange Hill. But you know, Grange Hill was probably one of the first things that was relatively consistent. You know, because really, I didn't do a lot until sort of mid to late teens, and then into my 20s. I think I was probably like 20 or 21 when I got EastEnders, and I did that for a few years. But I think that my teenage years, it's hard to remember, but there was a show called Teenage Hell Freak, and I remember I'd done 1 or 2 seasons of that. Yeah. Not particularly big part, but just there all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, Grange Hill, you know, I didn't do Grange Hill for that long. I think I did it for like 1 season.
Well, yeah, like before we get into that, how did that come about, Grange Hill?
Well, because when you're at Sylvia Young,
yeah,
you know, I guess it's like a giant trawler net that just goes through the school, right? And there's like which ones have we not had yet? And
right, okay.
You know, and I guess I read the lines relatively okay. I mean, I've got a small bit of it when I transferred a load of videotape years ago, and I've got to say, I used to imagine myself as a much better actor than I actually was, because it was just quite possibly like, it was dreadful, actually.
I think you're doing yourself a disservice there, to be honest.
No, I'm not sure if I actually remember the first scene that I filmed was also the first scene that that I was in the script.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, this boy kind of comes through the door and kind of does some kind of kung fu karate move thing, right? And they brought in somebody that I could rehearse with that kind of was like a kung fu guy, right? Yes. So like doing all these kicks and like really dramatic. And actually, I remember I was so bad that it kind of delayed lunch. It was like the last scene before lunch. And all I appeared to be able to do was open the door and manage to do something relatively mediocre with my arms, like some kind of thing with my arms. And I think I was meant to burst through that door and kind of do some kind of scissor kick.
Right, okay.
And I remember even then thinking, no, this is fucking hard. Like, this isn't going as I thought it would go. Like, maybe I'm out to be an actor.
So that scene you've just mentioned there. So you were in it in series 13, I think it was 1990, and you were there playing Raju. And you mentioned your first scene. You come in, and what was happening was the Simpsons were chasing a key, and
which was John, right?
Yeah, John Pickard was one of them. Yeah, and they were chasing a key because they bullied Akik, but also in like they were racist towards Akik as well. So
yeah,
they chased him down these stairs, and
that's right.
Raju came in, basically saying, come on then, let's have a go pick on someone your own size.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and he scares them off.
Yeah, but all I appeared to have been able to do was stare at them.
Yeah.
I think it was just I think I was meant to be scaring them with quite a lot of like amazing kind of moves, and it turned out that I couldn't speak and move at the same time. All I could really do was speak a bit,
because you stood there with your fists out, and the lads do get scared and run off, and it was Justine and Chrissy and Natalie came in, and one of them says, are you any good at karate? And I was thinking, we didn't actually see him do anything then.
No, I know exactly. Like, basically, I was completely unable to follow any of the direction in the script of the script was like, there's this karate guy flying around the basement. And all I appeared to have done was kind of stand there while everyone spoke about karate, but no one had witnessed any karate. Yeah. And I think that's literally why they were like, you know what, let's just go to lunch because this is useless.
Brilliant. And then he said he'd never done any karate before. He just watched a kung fu video, but your real life experience was pretty much exactly the same.
Exactly. Yeah. He'd watched a couple and he hadn't managed to actually do any.
Yeah, which led to Chrissy then calling him a fake, and she had a point, to be honest. And then Justine sort of asks him, why he was there in the basement, and he said he'd been waiting for them because he wanted to have a chat with them, because basically they were trying to do like a t-shirt business.
That's right. Yeah.
And Raju had found the room that they'd been using to do it, and he wanted to be their business partner.
Yeah, he was like a young entrepreneur.
Yeah, little bit of a Del Boy type.
And he had a cousin.
He did, because he says to them, because the girl said, well, it's going to take more than being noisy to be our business partner, to which he says, yeah, but I'm bringing commercial notes to this. Because, as you just mentioned, the cousin there, Ricky, his cousin worked for a delivery company, and he said, I might be able to get you some T-shirts and let him know if he wanted them, and then he walked off. Now, it's fair to say Raju was he was a little bit flash, wasn't he? He loved himself a little bit, like
yeah, I mean, like, he was meant to be, wasn't he? But again, like, I've gone back and looked at, I've seen a bit of this, and he was just struggling. But do you know what? It was actually at such a difficult time of my life that when I look at that, I'm surprised really that I was pleased to be there, because actually I think it was a really, really, like, around that time it was just awful for me as a kid. Yeah. So it's interesting because I will listen to a bit of you speaking to Claire Buckfield and her sort of reflecting on what a great time it was, right? Yeah. And I just thinking, God, it's just amazing to think that people were having such a good time at school. And I remember listening to Claire talking about like the tutors being so great, and whereas I remember being just terrified of, like, I couldn't do the academic work. I was struggling massively academically. There were a few boys in my year at school where there seemed to be 4 or 5 of us that, academically we weren't that strong, which kind of made it even more stressful, right? Because you're trying to do your schoolwork, and it's funny because I only did that one season, and remember getting a letter or being sort of my agent, well, it's probably Sylvia, saying like, why am I not going back? And she said, well, because you just told everybody that you hated it so much.
Oh, right, okay.
And I was like, oh, right, shit, okay, yeah. Okay. Also, probably because I wasn't very good, but yeah, I kind of look back on that time as I remember loving being at Elstree.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And which was just great when I then went to do EastEnders, and I was there for a long time. It was sort of just great being at that studio and being near where I had done Grange Hill, and sort of thinking, God, it's such a shame that when you're that young, I guess it depends a bit on your parents as well, or a lot on your parents. Like, you really do need to be steered and nurtured and kind of have that, be able to feel that you should be there and that it's fun, you know. Whereas I was just constantly thinking partly about work because it's how my school fees were paid.
Yeah, definitely.
So you just be like, well, I really need to get some work.
Yeah.
And then I think towards the end of school, I did get a scholarship, or got a half scholarship. But basically, you know, it wasn't spending money. You know, it was.
I mean,
fund yourself through school money.
That time in anyone's life, you know, it can be hard anyway, can't it? You know, dealing with a lot of things anyway. But then, as you said, then to be working as well, and to thinking like that, if I don't get work, I'm not going to be able to pay school fees as well. That must have been playing on your mind at the same time.
Yeah. It did massively, because I think because my dad didn't want me to go to theatre school, and then when my mum and dad split up when I was probably about 11, it was incredibly difficult, because, you know, even just when you're a kid anyway, like it would take me like 1.5 to 2 hours to get to school, to get to Sylvia's in Marylebone. Yeah, it's a lot of commuting when you're a kid. Definitely. You know,
definitely.
So you're grafting, you know, and it looks fun, and it was fun for, I guess, some people, and also some people were really good at it. I definitely wasn't, like, until I was older, in my late teens, and really felt like I enjoyed acting and I wanted to be an actor. But I think in the younger years, it was stressful. It was really, really stressful.
Yeah. Okay, but just going back to that, to your storyline there in Grange Hill, the girls decided that they wanted Raju to help them out.
Yes.
And we then met Raju's cousin, who we'd mentioned earlier on, Ricky. And it was fair to say that where Raju had got his brashness and his flashness from, because his cousin was exactly, in fact, he was probably more exaggerated.
Well, he I remember that guy. He was sort of, I remember when we were filming that, and actually I could have done with maybe meeting him before I'd shot my first scene, so he kind of maybe lifted me out of the doldrums of that first scene. But for me, I remember he was very good, but it felt like he was in a different show, didn't it?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like, it didn't feel that Grange Hill, you know, but actually he was very good. I mean, he was, but I remember being almost embarrassed by him, you know, because I was so self-conscious at that age, and he was so, he was a big character, wasn't he?
Yeah, big character, and there was quite a bit of filming in the van as well.
I remember that.
Or you must have all been like really cramped up in that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just driving around the small roads of Elstree, like around the areas around the studio.
And he's listening to, he's got his Bangor music and all that.
Banging in the van. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then the girls decide, we're going to have these T-shirts. Once Raju had told them that they'd have 28 days to pay for delivery. I mean, it wasn't just like your normal sort of fly-by-night Grange Hill money-making scheme. Raju knew what he was talking about. Like, he had that side about him. Like,
yeah, he did. And then, young businessman.
Yeah, and then the girls got some spray paint to start doing their designs.
That's right.
And they were in the basement to do it. And then Raju was annoyed that they hadn't waited to buy the spray paint, because he could have got it. Why he was annoyed was he could have got it at cost price, not at retail price.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. God, ended up being the story of my life. Yeah.
But then
these storylines were kind of, you know, these were the frivolous kind of fun bits around. Wasn't this around the same time that, God, he was such a great actor. I don't know what Paul Adams. Do you remember Paul Adams?
Yeah. So Matthew Pearson. Yeah.
Right, but was because there was a very big storyline around.
Yeah, so his family had sort of like gone from being really well off to like mum and dad that split up and didn't have any money and all that. And they were living in low demand accommodation and shared accommodation in some instances. So yeah, and that was the thing with Grange Hill, you know, we'd always have them serious storylines.
Yeah, going from t-shirt, random dudes in vans to some sort of bullying storyline or
brilliant.
Yeah, Paul crying in a bedsit, you know.
Yeah, but then there was a little bit of seriousness in your storyline because Raju then realised that where the girls were doing the spray painting had no ventilation. So
there's always a kind of like Billy's stuck in the well moment. Yeah.
So Raju and Natalie ran down there, and in the meantime, the Simpsons had tied rope around the door to stop the girls getting out.
That's right. So the fumes.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So that had been tied shut, and Raju pulled out a knife to cut the. Now, you know what I mean? Like just casually carrying a pen knife around with him.
Early knife crime days.
But managed to cut the rope, get the door open, and found Justine and Chrissy unconscious. So the business was hitting loads of problems, you know, like that, where they couldn't use the spray paints and because it nearly killed Justine and Chrissy.
Well, every kind of so many Grange Hill storylines, right? Kind of there's moments and the ups and downs. I mean, what a roller coaster.
And Chrissy was like, "Well, Raju's in charge of supplies. He should decide what we should be using." Until Raju pointed out that the choice of paint was Chrissy's job, as she was the designer. And then they couldn't get any of the money that they were owed because people just weren't paying them. And we've just mentioned there about Matthew, Paul Adams' character. The girls were really harsh on him because he wasn't paying until Raju stepped in saying, you know, doing his usual, calming everyone down, you know, his flash businessman. Matthew's a reasonable man type speech. And he paid him tomorrow. And it was then Tegs, Sean Maguire, said he'd pay for Matthew and handed over a $5.
Sean Maguire was in it then as well, was he?
Yeah, okay.
It's amazing how you just don't remember.
And, you know, they couldn't believe that Tegs was handing over a $5. I mean, that had become a practice for the kids in school, I imagine, in high school to be carrying a $5 around these days. But
$5 is still a lot of money to be carrying around.
Yeah.
That must have been like the equivalent of 20 quid.
Yeah. And then, you know, they used dye to make the t-shirts, but the dye ran when the t-shirts got washed. So eventually they decided on using felt tip pens to print their designs. And it started doing quite well. They started doing quite well until Mike Bentley, who was like the sixth form heartthrob, the sprinter, bought a t-shirt with a caricature of Mr. Hargreaves on it. And they were told that they'd have to shut the business down. So they had a meeting about it where it was confirmed. And that was the last time we saw Raju.
Yeah. and then that was it.
4 episodes. Were you only ever going to do 4 episodes?
No, I think I was going to do more. But I remember getting a letter about it, and I remember, I'd obviously been quite clear that, well, look, there's 2 things, right? Like, firstly, I was not very, if you think about the kind of performances that people like Paul were just knocking out the park, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was definitely not in that arena of acting, like, no way. And so, you know, I think that there was an opportunity to probably be there longer, but also it was the first time, you know, because I was playing an Indian kid, and I'm not Indian, part Spanish and Italian, and actually, you know, it was the first time that once it was on TV as well, I'd experienced racism because I used to go to a youth club where I lived in North London, and I couldn't go there anymore.
Wow.
And I remember just thinking, oh my God, like shit. Like I remember very, very vividly leaving that youth club and running home because I'd been threatened. And just thinking, sod this.
And that had never happened before.
No, because I had an Indian name, and on Grange Hill, and I guess that's what sort of like flagged it up. I mean, I had to deal with quite a lot where I lived of sort of generally kids, I guess, being jealous of the fact that I was on the TV, made me stand out like a lemon where I lived, and it didn't really attract a lot of, there was nobody kind of patting me on the back saying well done. It was predominantly pretty negative because it sort of, you've got to, when you go to Sylvia's, you've got, firstly, you stick out like a sore thumb because you're wearing it was a navy blue blazer and then it went to black, but like with a red braiding around it.
Right.
So if you're walking through North London, or, it's like fine if you live in Hampstead, right? If you live in a pretty posh bit of London, there's kids walking around in blazers with all different kinds of coloured braiding, right? Or shorts and stockings and tights and like all sorts of random private school uniforms. But you get off the train at Brimsdown wearing that, you might as well be wearing a hat that just says "kick me here." So it's I think that that made acting not a lot of fun, actually. If you were on something that people saw you on the TV, it wasn't really something to be that cheery about where I was living back then.
Wow, so that's unbelievable, though, for it to have never happened before Grange Hill, and then you go in it and you're playing a character, and people not realizing the difference between you, and the character.
That's kids, isn't it? So it's something that we forget as we get older. But when you're a teenager, it's all pretty real, isn't it? It's like you're in a little world that the adults can't quite see, even though you're mixing with them.
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned the adults there. You were in a great deal of scenes with any of the adults or the teachers there. But how did you find the relationship between the kids and the adults?
Do you know what? I really remember just what an incredible... It was a very, despite the fact of what I said about myself in terms of maybe how I felt, I found the set and everybody that worked there like so lovely and so charming and very supportive. I mean, I suppose, even then, it's like it's a set full of kids, right? So that making sure that everything was controlled and no one was about to get a light dropped on their head. But I do remember very clearly how lovely all of the adults were and all of the crew were. I remember it was a nice place, But I think that kind of I probably felt a lot more like I was sort of observing that from behind glass rather than actually being in there and living it at the time.
Yeah, right, okay. Because I mean, it must have been hard as well, just the fact that at that time you were there for such a short space of time as well. And I know, like you're saying that, like, you knew people who were there, but you weren't necessarily working with those people who you knew, or were you?
No, it was, to be honest, there was so many people there that I knew from school. And also randomly, I think that wasn't there a girl in Grange, because there was a girl that lived on my road in Enfield, right, in Brimsdown, called Natalie Poyser.
Yeah.
Right, she was in Grange Hill, wasn't she?
She was in it. So her character was a couple of years younger than Raju. She was the sister of Natalie Stevens, who was played by Julie Buckfield.
She lived like 20 doors from me,
right,
on Redlands Road in Brimsdown, where I grew up.
Yeah.
Wow. So, like, you know, so actually, you know, I don't know. You know, you're saying she wasn't there when I was there, but like, I don't think there were many kids on set that I didn't know, apart from, I guess there were a handful from other theatre schools, like probably Corona and maybe Barbara Speaks, or you know, I'm not sure.
I think Natalie Poyser probably would have been there the same time, but it was like her first year when you were you were supposed to be a third year.
Right.
I think that's how it works. Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite an incestuous place, really, when you've got all those kids in that. Like, you know, there's probably the kids are probably only coming from like 2 or 3 schools, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now, whenever I'm putting an episode of the podcast out, I put picture clues on social media as to who the guest is going to be.
I don't think anyone's going to get this one.
Whoever guesses first gets to ask the next guest a question. So the last guest was Sonia Kearns, and the person that got it right was a lad called Stephen Pease, and he's got a question. His question is, so obviously we know you were involved with the t-shirt printing storyline in Grange Hill, and he was a bit of a businessman, bit of a Del boy. But did you ever get involved in any of your own money-making schemes when you were at school?
Do you know what? I don't think I did. I'm trying to remember. I was very good at organizing fights.
Right. Okay.
Right. I remember that very clearly. I was really, me and a few of the boys in my class. Well, there was quite a bit of bullying back then, and we would probably pass that on to the younger generation as well. I'm not proud to say, but
it's okay.
I think that, yeah, if I'd been charging for the fights, then maybe that would have been. But I definitely had a knack of starting fights, but not being caught at the end.
Right, okay.
But just organising them between other boys, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a bit of some early management skills there, but not. But yeah, not selling. I'm trying to remember, but not really, because also our school was. Sylvia's was really small then, right? Because it wasn't even, I mean, I guess it was reasonably famous because there wasn't that many, but now people seem to really know that school, right? Because there's been a lot of kids that have gone on to be in, you know, massive bands or TV shows or whatever, really.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so then after Grange Hill, you know, you've mentioned a couple of things that you did, and you mentioned Teenage Health Freak, which early, it's so early 90s. Well, I was watching bits of it the other day, and
that was a good show, right?
Yeah.
They were great writers. I can't remember the guys that I remember, like, for the time as well. Like, yeah, it was well written. It was good. It was actually quite good.
Yeah, I'll be honest, it was one of those programs that sort of passed me by a little bit. I mean, where was it? 93. So I was 18 then. So I was discovering
so you were out
and stuff like that.
You were out. Your TV days were over.
But yeah, like when I was watching it today, it's so of its time because it's proper 90s. Everyone's dressed like everyone was in the 90s, you know. And I seem to remember a lot of the scenes that you were in, there was an a cappella, like a doo-wop group.
Yeah. We were an a cappella group. But that's what was so weird about it, right? Because it was like they would just suddenly, they would just suddenly launch into these 4 boys sort of singing. It was really bizarre, actually.
And can you sing?
I can sing.
Right, that's what I'm
sing. Yeah.
Oh, don't worry, I won't ask you to do it now.
No, okay, thanks. No, I'm not embarrassed to say that. Yeah, I think singing was probably singing was something that I really enjoyed and great to learn at that age because it's something that you don't forget, you know.
Yeah, brilliant. And then a few years later, you mentioned you know walking that well-travelled path from Grange Hill in Northam to Albert Square in Walford.
Just from one dressing from one side of the from the studio to the other. Well, actually, they're sort of right next to each other, actually, because you'd kind of go to lunch and Grange Hill would have broken up for lunch, and you'd be like, oh, bloody hell, this queue's going to go on forever. Just like a load of kids at the front of the queue, just thinking I'm going to be waiting all day for my lunch. But I think, I don't know how old I was. I think I was about 20.
Right. Well, and you played a very sort of different character, didn't you? I mean, still a businessman, to be fair to him. Dan was still a businessman, but in a very different way. I mean, what, that must have been great to do, though, as well. Playing that type of character.
Yeah, it was brilliant, actually. Yeah, I really loved my time at EastEnders. And funnily enough, I had, before EastEnders, I had been working. So John Pickard and his brother Nick and his younger brother Mark, they all lived at a pub in West London, right? Because his dad was their dad was, and they owned pubs, and we had kind of taken the pub that they'd lived in and opened a bar there called the Chilled Eskimo, and I was working there and running that, and it started off with me and Nick running it, and John was there, but John would have been quite young, because I think I was only just like 18, 19. And I remember, like, Nick, we all went up for Hollyoaks just before it started. Nick got Hollyoaks, so Nick went off to do that. Then I was at the pub still, like opening, like doing sort of 10-hour shifts, sitting there.
Right.
And then John was doing EastEnders, and the scripts kept on arriving. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, bloody hell, like, this is a nightmare. Like, I'm going to be stuck in this pub forever.
Yeah.
Because, and then I got EastEnders, and I was like, oh, okay, great. Like, now I don't have to work at the pub either. And Dan was a really, like, they were good storylines, quite dark, and it was it was good, and it went on for a while, actually, because there was a gap, and then I went back, it was good. It was a good show to be on, and obviously to be that age and kind of feel like you've got a reasonable income stream for a little while as well, because that's obviously one of the worst things about being an actor, unless you're working all the time, is the money, right? Like, and you don't have a steady income, right? So being able to do something like EastEnders means that you're kind of like, oh, this might be all right, like it could be okay, but then you don't work for 6 months, or so it's a funny thing to transition, actually, I think, from a kid that acts into an adult that acts. And it's also, I think, quite difficult. It's probably different now, or I think it is different now. It certainly looks like it is, but there was an element of, if you went to theatre school, there was a general consensus that you were, like, you weren't a serious actor.
Right, I get you.
You were a bit of an all-rounder. Like, you could, but you weren't, you weren't like a serious actor.
Yeah.
I think that follows you around for quite a few years as well. But, EastEnders was good because it was a good part.
Yeah.
It was a dark kind of part.
Did you get much grief from the public for playing that type of character?
No, I got lots of pats on the back for playing that character.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough. Brilliant.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Sort of people just quite like that kind of, that dark kind of character and think it's funny, and but no, I didn't get any grief.
Right, okay. Brilliant. All right, and then moving on a little bit more, you did an episode of The Bill. Now, I'm only mentioning that because Joe Povey was in it and Renee Zager was in it as well, and they were both Grange Hill alumni as well. Like, Oh, I did The Bill several times. I remember
like it got to a point where, you know, because they'd kind of just like milled through every actor, right?
Yeah.
So I remember I think at one point you could only do the bill once a year, and eventually it moved to once every 6 months.
Right. Okay.
They're just running out of people to turn up and be on it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a small area, Sunhill, so obviously everyone's related to each other, so they're all going to look like each other.
That's a good point. There should have been a few more repeat offenders on
it. Brilliant. And then I wanted to talk to you about something called Jesus.
Oh yeah, Jesus.
Right?
Because Gary Oldman.
Yeah, when I looked at that cast, I was like, wow. I mean, you know,
that was amazing. I'd forgotten about that.
As a relatively young actor, you know, that must have been great to be working with the likes of Gary Oldman and G.W. Bailey and Jacqueline Bliss, people like that. Like,
yeah, gosh, yes, that was in Morocco. That had that dude in it from Police Academy.
Yeah, G.W. Bailey,
yeah, playing like a serious role. That's right. Because I remember being at this like amazing hotel in the middle of the desert, just sort of thinking, I think that's the dude from Police Academy sitting next to Gary Oldman.
Yeah. It's just like... So for anyone that's listening that doesn't know, G.W. Bailey played Captain Harris in Police Academy, who's one of the best comedic villains. That character, he's one of the best comedic villains you're ever going to see in film, in my opinion.
He was such a great actor.
Was he naturally funny as well?
Yes, he was, and I remember that very vividly, and very generous, and really, really, really nice. And I wasn't, you know, I didn't do much in, like, I probably had like 5 lines in that film, right? But it's one of those things where you get to be there for quite a while, right? This is like a really good job where you're like, you're just in the middle of a desert in a really nice hotel doing relatively long days, but, you know, kind of, it was one of those things that probably these days it would be like for Netflix, right? Whereas this was, you know, it wasn't a cinema film, right? But they did, I imagine, blow 50% of the budget on Gary Oldman and, you know, like these amazing actors that would probably get it some traction, you know? But yeah, wow, gosh, I'd forgotten about that. That was, so that was after EastEnders, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've got down, Yeah. And then a couple more bits, but there was also something similar to Jesus in the fact of the cast was Jack and the Beanstalk.
Oh yeah.
Right? So it's called The Real Story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and it was like a modern take. But again, that's got like Matthew Modine and Vanessa Redgrave and Mia Sara and Daryl Hannah and all these people in.
Yeah, but that was just shot in the UK. I remember that was that was a pretty boring job. I think that was actually near that was shot near Elstree, actually.
Right. But were you on screen with any of those people?
I don't think so. I can't really. No, I can't. I can barely remember it. I just remember the name now that you're saying it. But
your character was called Operator Number 2.
Right. Well, that's why I can't remember. Jesus Christ. Yeah, some sort of like security guards in some. Yeah. But that's definitely. I remember doing that.
Yeah, and then there's something else called Making Juice. The Making of Juice, was that one of yours?
Oh, that was a mockumentary. Yeah. Oh God, I feel like I should go back and do some of my own updating.
I mean,
on IMDb.
You've just mentioned it, a mockumentary. That was the time of mockumentaries, though, wasn't it?
It was.
The Office was out and all that. So
that's right.
Then I've got you down as being the producer of something called Free Speech.
Oh yeah. With Danny Dyer was in that,
right?
I think.
Yeah, right. So is that really different then from being like the actor and then being the producer?
No, I mean, I should be completely transparent about that credit. I knew the directors and they really needed some more money.
Right,
so I
okay.
gave it to them. I think they were a couple of grand short.
Right.
So I really didn't do much producing other than I produced some cash for them to finish it, I think.
Okay. So that was 2004. Now, I haven't got anything else for you in the industry from then. So did you take was it a conscious step to say, right, I'm not doing it anymore?
I'm done. Yeah. Right. Totally done. I'd started a business in the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, selling organic food.
All right.
Home delivery. It was obviously like kind of very early to be doing something like that. It was relatively successful. It grew quite quickly. It grew from a kind of a very small veg spot scheme. And basically I used to like pull boxes of fruit and veg up and down the road, trying to flog to my neighbours. And then I built it from there. But it kind of, it grew into a sort of £1.5, £2 million business within sort of 3.5 years. But very randomly, while I was doing that, and I did that, I started that on my own, and then had a couple of business partners, which just meant it didn't work out. It did not work out at all eventually. But while I'd been doing that, I had started to collect a lot of work by an artist called Banksy. And obviously back then, no one knew who Banksy was. So about 2002, I started to get a lot into graffiti art and started to buy a lot of his work. And then that led into, actually it's probably a bit later than that, like 2005, right?
Right.
And started to represent graffiti artists. So I started dealing in quite a lot of graffiti art. I was buying work by Banksy, and I started to put on small shows. And then while I had that business, that was called Amalas, while I was doing shows and probably looked after sort of 8 to 10 graffiti artists. And then when I did that, while I was doing that, I started a new organic fruit and veg business that was on my own. Right. So it was just mine. And that was in 2007. And that was called Whole Good, which is still going now. We grew that to almost 40 million. We employ 160 people in West London. We've stopped doing one part of the business, which was sort of like a natural foods, and really it's only fruit and veg now. So we, that's been my thing since then. So I stepped out of being the CEO of that about 3 years ago, and just stepped back in as the CEO at the beginning of this year.
Right.
And fully in that, Yeah. And I think the last casting I ever went on was for like a Bollywood movie.
Oh, right.
And that's where I met my wife.
Oh,
and we've been married for 22 years.
Brilliant.
And I started Whole Good probably 17 years ago. So, my business, my a big part of my life has predominantly been that, and I've got 3 kids, right. So 14, 12, and 9. So pretty much it's been about scaling Whole Good, building that into something that can drive a lot of purpose in sustainable farming. It's been a passion of mine, and my wife, she still acts, and she's a writer, and she's got a podcast called Women Are Mad.
Brilliant. So once you finish listening to this one, get over and listen to Women Are Mad as well. Basically, what you're telling me is your life, your later life, is what Raju would have aspired to have been when he was a kid. Is what you're saying, like
for sure. Yeah. No, it's true actually. Yeah.
yeah.
Young,
Brilliant.
inspiring businessman starts business. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, can I ask though, what was it made you decide, right, it's going to be organic food?
Well, that's so simple. It was because when I was probably like 19, maybe younger, maybe 19, my girlfriend at the time, her dad was like a real foodie, really got into food, really got into diet. And I learned so much about food from my girlfriend's dad at the time. And really it was from that. It was from being inspired by a girlfriend's dad, right? Yeah, we were doing these weird diets, only eating raw food and learning a lot about nutrition and but actually, part of that really, really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I think especially kind of once you start to understand the principles and the sustainability of organic farming methods and how, really it's things like that that are going to help us get through this climate disaster.
Yeah.
If at all we can get through it. Right. So actually I found John really inspiring and it stuck with me. And, obviously as I've grown the business and, you feel like you're doing something, doesn't feel like I've started a gambling app. Do you know what I mean? I can sleep pretty good at night. It feels like a role with purpose.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really kind of, that really just goes back to John and how he inspired me as a teenager.
Yeah. Brilliant. Now, just changing subject completely. You mentioned you were at school with a lot of the Grange Hill cast. So can I ask, are you still in touch with any of them now?
Not really. I mean, I'm in touch with people. I'm in touch with some people at school that I was at school with, but rarely.
Right.
I live very nearby to someone that I've known since I was like 8 from Sylvia, Lee Hanning. He lives up the road from me. And, there'll still be kind of, 50th birthday parties of people that we went to school with. And, like you'll see some people then, but I got to be honest, it's the past sort of 20 years for me with work. Is I did nothing but work really, and obviously raise a young family with my wife. But growing Whole Good from me and a van to what it is now. I started Whole Good with no money, literally with a rental van, and that has taken a shitload of work.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, Carl, we are coming towards the end of the interview now, and I've got the same few questions that I always ask everyone at the end, and they're all Grange Hill related. Okay. So, over the last couple of years, there's been talk in the press of a Grange Hill movie in the works. What do you think of the idea of a Grange Hill movie?
Yeah, I think it would be great. It's still relevant, right? I mean, like that's the thing with like a good kids TV program. Like those storylines were relevant, and they were great. It's the sort of thing that you can imagine. It's the right time, because you're just going to get so many people that remember it from growing up, going back to watch it. But it would work. It would definitely work.
Definitely. And if you were asked, would we see a return of Raju?
You know what? The chances of being asked, let's face it, it's pretty damn slim.
But if
the call came, Neil, I'd be there in a flash.
Brilliant,
yeah.
brilliant.
I'd like to think of myself as a better actor in my later years rather than
we can
younger
see
years.
we can see what the businessman that Raju became with his t-shirts, can't we?
Exactly.
So yeah, all right. So and you mentioned earlier on that you watched a lot of television, and Grange Hill was one of it. So other than Raju, who was your favourite character in Grange Hill?
I don't remember the character names, right?
Okay.
Well, I suppose it's going to be a mix-up now.
Okay.
And this is not a bias at all, but I genuinely remember when I was in Grange Hill being incredibly impressed with John Pickard,
yeah,
Paul Adams,
yeah,
and then obviously probably my age, similar age to you, probably. It's got a kind of reaches back towards Tucker and Roland, and all that, because really it's not just about the actors, right? It's about the emotion that it kind of drums up in you.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
actually, I think when I think back to those kind of guys, like, and who was that amazing woman that ended up going into EastEnders when it first started?
Susan Tully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's a director now.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
Yeah. People like that, they were amazing. Yeah. They were brilliant, right? They were really, really good.
Yeah.
But genuinely, when I was in it, I remember, I think that a lot of the people, when I was in it, a lot of the people were quite good. I'd like to think that that's why I looked so bad.
Yeah. No, well, I've often said that about that year, the cohort you were in. Certainly, like throughout the time they were on, there was like sort of yourself and Paul and the Buckfields and Rachel Roberts and Desmond Askew and
like the Buckfields, Claire and Julie were really, really good, and I remember at school them being really good. They were like genuinely talented, right?
Yeah.
And Desmond Askew, very, very good. I don't know if he's still an actor, but I remember he went to America.
Yeah, he lives in America. And he does
in LA.
Does a lot of voiceover work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But Louisa Bradshaw White and she turned up in it later, and Sonia Cairns, obviously, who was the and that year
they were all good.
Everyone was so good. Yeah. Okay. And so you might have answered this question already. If you couldn't have played Raju, which other character would you like to have played?
I think I would have been. Well, obviously, I'd like to see myself as Tucker, right? But okay. I was no Tucker, that's for sure. But yeah, I think probably with my psyche at the time, I probably would have just been best fitted for any part of a bully.
Right.
I was pretty miserable 14-year-old.
Right. Okay. And so the final question, Carl, then, is why do you think there is still such affection for Grange Hill?
I think it was a time when TV, if you think back to, well, if you look at where we are now with TV, right? And when I look at the way my 3 children watch TV, and of course they don't watch TV, right? Yeah. They watch their phones or iPads or some TV. Yeah. But there's something to be said for, firstly, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but that lack of choice, right? So there's solidarity in the viewing, isn't there? You remember that, like, people would watch Spitting Image, people would watch Minder, people, The Bill. These were big moments.
Yeah.
And children's TV, I think, it didn't have that. It was one of the first great kids dramas, right? Yeah. Whereas, so I think that it tackled a lot of really relevant subjects. It was the first kind of, one of the early shows to do that. You think like Just Say No campaign and all of that. It was the beginning of sort of that TV could be relevant and it could have purpose in a child's life. And it wasn't just necessarily about Blue Peter. It was about drama. Yeah. Drama for kids. If you think about it, there wasn't that much of it then.
No.
But actually, you look at it now and how relevant it is and how important it is. Grange Hill was part of the seed of that, and it was one of those things. I think that also it was very good, but what makes it even better is that solidarity of watching, the fact that there are a lot of us, you know, getting home and being able to be around by 5:05 or just after news round, whenever it was, right? So, you know, I think that was the secret sauce, and it was Phil Redmond, wasn't it? And he's, you know, and he just basically is obviously a bit of a genius.
Yeah, definitely. And if you missed it, you missed it. Didn't you as well? There was no
and if
catch
you
up.
missed it, yeah. Can you record it? Can you record it for me? But inevitably, you'd never go back and watch it anyway, would you?
No,
but like, you know, it's one of those things that you definitely. I mean, all aspects of TV have lost this now, right? But like that idea that when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, my youngest Silas, he's 9, and literally just this year, we were watching Nick Pickard on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out.
All right, yeah.
And it was the first time ever that he said, "Why does it say live?" And I was like, "Well, because it's live." And he was like, "What do you mean it's happening now?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's happening now."
Wow.
It was like, "What? And are there other people watching it at the same time we're watching it?" And I was like, "Oh shit! This concept of, you know, BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, Channel 4, eventually Channel 5. Of course, it doesn't exist for him, you know." Wow. So you're just like, "Oh shit, man! Yeah, this is live. Yeah, this is live." And it's like, and so then it kind of got to a point where he would be trying to make sure that, you know, because you know, obviously you can pause it. He was like, "Do not pause it. I want to watch it when all the other people are watching it." So there is a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, definitely.
That solidarity and knowing that all your mates were watching it at the same time as you, and you were going to talk about it the next day or whenever. But I think there's a real relevance there to that as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, Carl, thank you so much for coming on and talking. Cheers, and Neil, giving us your experiences. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, no worries. And well done for like holding up the baton, or the fork, I should say, really. It's absolutely bizarre. When I saw the name of this podcast, I was like, what the hell is this? And of course I was like, oh shit, yes. Right. Sausage on a fork. Old school. The old school opening.
Yeah. No, well, no, once again, thank you so much. I've mentioned this a couple of times in the last few. This is possibly the quickest turnaround I've ever had from getting someone booked in to recording it, because I think it was earlier this week, or maybe about a week, 7 days ago.
Because you know, somebody emailed me from the office and they were like, "This guy's called." I was like, and then I saw you on LinkedIn and I was like, "It's okay, it's not a complete
So we were literally, as Peter Kay said, booked it, packed it, and off. We've done it. So honestly, thank you so much for coming on. It has been great talking.
Yeah, you're welcome, Bill. Thank you.
And to anyone that's listening, I'll speak to you next time. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Neil.